Hello everyone, and welcome back to Adnan's Scary Stories. We often think of deserts as empty, lifeless places. But what if that emptiness is a lie? What if the silence is filled with whispers and the dunes themselves hold the memories of those lost to time? Tonight's story comes from a geologist, a man of science, who ventured into the vast, desolate Cholistan Desert. He went looking for answers in the rocks, but found a horror trapped within the sand. My name is Qasim, and by profession I am a geologist. My work involves deciphering the secrets hidden within rocks, soil, and the layers of the earth. I have always been a man of logic, someone who measures everything against the yardstick of science and evidence. For me, every story, every incident had a tangible, material cause. I considered ghosts, spirits, and the supernatural to be nothing more than flights of human fancy. But last year, in the desolate expanse of the Cholistan Desert, I came face to face with a reality that shattered my science, my logic, and my very being, scattering them like grains of sand in the wind. It all began with a major construction project. I was dispatched to survey a remote, uninhabited desert region to assess the land structure for a new road. This was an area. The first few days were fascinating. I would work all day collecting rock samples, and at night I would sit outside my tent and gaze at the star-filled sky. The silence of the desert was profound and peaceful. But on the third day I saw it. I was driving through a dry riverbed when I noticed something utterly bizarre in the distance. It was a colossal, solitary black rock, standing like a giant sentinel in the flat, barren desert. Its shape was strange, almost like melted wax, and its surface was covered with thousands of tiny, intricate holes. As a geologist, I had never seen anything like it. I drove closer to examine it. As I approached, I heard a very faint, continuous whispering sound. It wasn't the wind, it was coming from inside the rock. I looked closer, and the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. From the thousands of tiny holes in the rock, a fine stream of sand was pouring out in an endless cascade, as if the rock itself was weeping. It was a weeping rock, and the falling sand created a soft, melodic, whispering sound. I took out my equipment and began recording the sound. It was a scientific marvel. I decided to set up my camp nearby to study it further. That night, as I sat in my tent, the whispers were still audible. But now they weren't just the hiss of sand. There was a cadence to them, an intonation, as if someone were trying to speak from a great distance. I dismissed it as an auditory illusion caused by the wind. The next day I began excavating the area around the rock. I found old bones and broken pottery shards. This was an ancient burial ground. The rock stood in the middle of a graveyard. That evening, as the sun was setting, a local Bedouin, who seemed to appear out of nowhere, approached my camp. His name was Jamil. When he saw me camped near the rock, a look of sheer terror crossed his face. "Sahib, what are you doing here?" he asked, his voice trembling. "This place is not good. We call it the Rock of Sighs." I smiled. "Don't worry, old man. I'm a scientist. I'm just conducting research." He grabbed my arm, his grip surprisingly strong. "If you value your life, listen to my 3 rules," he said with grave seriousness. "First, do not go near that rock after sunset. Second, if you hear your name in the whispers, do not answer. And third, and most important, never take anything from that rock, not even a single grain of sand." After saying this, he hurried away, as if afraid the night would catch him there. His words unsettled me, but I tried to brush them off. That night, as I listened to the whispers amongst the thousands of hissing sounds, I heard one voice, crystal clear, calling my name. Qasim. My blood froze. I told myself it was my tired mind, finding patterns in the noise. I did not answer. The next day, while analyzing the weeping sand, my eyes caught something glinting. It was a small, teardrop-shaped black stone, smooth and beautiful, almost like a fossilized tear from the rock itself. The geologist in me screamed to take it, but the Bedouin's warning echoed in my ears. I chose science over superstition. I picked up the stone. The moment I touched it, the whispers stopped. A complete dead silence. And then, they started again. But this time, they felt different. They were angry, hungry. That night, the real terror began. The whispers sounded like they were right next to my ear. And now, they weren't just calling my name. They began to mimic my mother's voice. "Qasim, son, I'm here. Help me." My mind knew it was impossible, but my heart felt like it was being stabbed. Then they mimicked my father, my best friend. They were playing with my every emotional vulnerability. Terrified, I zipped my tent shut. Just then, I heard the sound of sand being poured onto the roof. I peeked outside. The sky was clear. Where was the sand coming from? I looked inside and saw a small pile of sand forming in a corner of my sealed tent. As I watched, the pile began to move, as if something was stirring beneath it. I screamed and scrambled out of the tent. I decided I wouldn't stay another moment. I frantically threw my gear into the Jeep, but as I started the engine, a ferocious sandstorm erupted out of nowhere. The sky turned black. I floored the accelerator, but I was driving blind. Then, in the beam of my headlights, I saw them. Tall, thin figures were standing in the swirling sand. They seemed to be made of sand and wind themselves. They had no faces, but I could feel them all watching me. They moved towards my Jeep. The whispers were now a deafening roar of thousands of voices screaming my name. Suddenly, my engine died. The sand figures surrounded me. Sand began to pour through the cracks in the doors and windows. A hand made of sand phased through the glass and touched my face. The moment it touched me, I felt a change. My strength drained away. I looked at my own hand. My skin. It was turning gray, cracking, like it was turning to stone. I tried to scream, but only a dry hiss came out. I was turning into sand. I could feel my soul being pulled from my body, drawn towards that weeping rock. Weeks later, a rescue team found my Jeep, half buried in sand. They found my camera. Its last photo was of the sandstorm, but if you look closely, you can see a screaming human face within the vortex. They found my gear, but my body was never found. They say if you go to that part of the desert today, near the Rock of Sighs, you will find a new life-sized statue. A statue of a man, frozen in a state of terror, looking up at the sky. And from its eyes, tears of sand are forever falling. And if you listen closely to the whispers of the rock, amongst the thousands of ancient sighs, you will now hear a new, fresh voice, endlessly calling its own name, Qasim.